welcome back to Saturn Sirens. My name is Chase.
I'm Pierre.
And that's Mary. We are doing our last episode today about the houses, so that's really exciting. And it's the 12th house, which is actually my favorite house, so I'm really excited to talk about it. Mary, take it away.
The 12th house. I feel like, Chase, you're the pro on this house because you've got your stellium there with the North Node. So I'll start and then I'm going to hand it over to you because I'm interested in hearing what you have to say even.
Okay, I've done a lot of thinking about it.
The 12th house, the final area of life in the birth chart, which is actually funny because it rules you being in the womb, so before you were born. That's one of the many things that the 12th house represents. It's the most elusive, misunderstood area of life in the birth chart. I've heard it described so many different ways. The theme of the 12th house is endings. It's the finality of the birth chart. It's the third water sign, which is Pisces, and it's all about confusion, illusion, but it's also where we meet the spiritual realm. And actually, it's pretty funny because we just had the weirdest experience trying to record this podcast that's never happened to us before, where I wasn't showing up on the podcast, but I could hear them, and it just felt like I was in the spirit realm and I was stuck there and I was a ghost because they couldn't hear me or see me, but I could hear them. I just felt like that was a huge sign with the 12th house because that's exactly the type of energy of the 12th house. It's where miracles kind of happen. It's the things in life that we can't understand with the mind. We have to feel our way through the 12th house. It's very scary. It also is a lot about sleeping, dreaming, your subconscious, your unconscious. It's where you self-sabotage. It's where your hidden enemies are. There's just so much to talk about with the 12th house that I don't even know where to begin. I want to hear what you have to say, Chase, because I feel like you know this house best.
Yeah, so one time Mary told me that she doesn't think I'm a 12th houser because I don't act like one, but I really feel like I am the biggest 12th houser there's ever been. Like, no one's ever been more 12th houser than me. I have talked about a lot of this stuff already in different episodes. When I think about my birth chart, I think about my 12th house stellium, and I do have a second house stellium, but it's sextiling my 12th house stellium. I really feel like my whole life revolves around this area of life, and I've always been drawn to the darkest things, the most spiritual things, the most elusive things, and that's kind of been my focus my entire life. I grew up in a charismatic Christian church, so I was exposed to prophecy, healing, speaking in tongues, like all that weird stuff at a very young age, and that was very normal to me. I've always, still to this day, felt like I have a close relationship with God. I feel like He talks to me. I feel like I talk to Him. My life's purpose is to pursue spiritual knowledge. That's very 12th house. The 12th house gets a bad rep, though. When you have 12th house placements, people are like, oh, that's bad. And there are negative things that come with having 12th house placements. I do think it can come with a lot of like mental challenges, like mental health issues. I have ADHD, anxiety, depression. A lot of that has to do, I think, with having a 12th house stellium or maybe Pisces placements. You're very absorbent of other people's energy, and so you end up sleeping a lot because you're so exhausted all the time. I do have that problem. Like, I do sleep a lot. I do think that there are negative aspects. I think 12th housers, when they see they have 12th house placements, I don't think they're like, oh no, this is bad. I think they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I could see how, as a parent, if I saw my child had some 12th house placements where I'd be concerned, I would say for those people, it's okay. It's not a bad thing, but there are going to be challenges. The child might not feel accepted at school. They might feel very different, like an outsider. They might have mental challenges. But yeah, that's kind of what I would have to say about that in a nutshell.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the 12th versus the 6th is the mind-body connection axis. I think I know this because of my Virgo Pisces North and and south node. It's funny too because using Placidus, they fall in my 12th and 6th house. I have my south node in my 12th house using Placidus, and although I'm a whole sign avid user, I definitely feel like having a Pisces north node kind of helps me understand this house, but I still struggle to put it into words. It's very exhausting with the 12th house, even just talking about it. It's so exhausting, and I always take things as a sign, and I feel like while trying to make this podcast, I felt like I couldn't connect to you guys. So when you have planets in this house, you can feel kind of disconnected, like they're harder to access. The energy of that planet is harder to access. And it's like, especially with Mercury here, for example, usually you're such a deep thinker, you have such a strong intuition, but you have such a difficult time being heard and expressing that. And it's kind of like having Mercury retrograde, but I think it's even harder because it's just harder to access that in that house. Or the moon here, for example, you feel so deeply that at a point you just turn numb. I feel like you kind of just detach, you have to, because it's just such a deep area of life. I do think it's a difficult area of life. I think there is suffering that's experienced in the 12th house, but I also feel like it's kind of a finality house. So if you master the energy of this house, you can kind of do anything in a way.
Yeah. Everything depends on how a person does their life, right? On the positive side, with respect to planets or the sign on that house, I think you see people who use those things in their career. There is a sextile from the 12th house to the 10th house, and you find a lot of people, they come in with these gifts, but they don't know about them. Then they develop them. I think I was reading in this book, sacrificing yourself for the collective when you come and use your gifts, not for yourself. I do think that Chase was saying there's just a lot. You're in touch with so much energy. It's overwhelming, and that's why you have to sleep. Also, you're probably sleeping because you are connecting with the spiritual, and that's what you're supposed to do. That's the energy of the place.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's super exhausting. That's why it ties into sleeping and dreaming. The amount of compassion and self-sacrifice that comes with having your planets in the 12th house is so immense, especially if you have a planet like Mars here. I feel like you're constantly taking on the problems of other people, and it's very much that victim-savior dynamic that's playing out over and over again in your life, where you really want to help people, and it really is the area of life that rules healers. And you don't even know because it's your blind spot with the 12th house. And like Pierre was saying, you kind of discover this at some point in your life, usually after going through some type of spiritual awakening where you discover you're having planets in your 12th house. So they're kind of dormant at first, and so they're harder to access. When you start to access that energy, if you're kind of all of a sudden hit with this huge wave of healing. And it's seeing what's beyond the veil with the 12th house, connecting to spirit, to the spiritual realm, whatever that is for you. It's just such a murky territory. It really can get pretty scary with the 12th house, in my opinion, especially if you are just very kind of logical, you've got lots of Mercury or Virgo energy. You really struggle to understand this area of life because it's not mentally perceived at all. It's very much something you feel, and it's like that extra sense that you have that you can't really describe. So it's very kind of scary, and also because of the fact that it ties into hidden enemies, realizing that there are not so friendly forces in the spiritual realm, and it's like kind of goes hand in hand. You can't really avoid the darker side of life, what's beyond when you're exploring the 12th house.
This is the house where you'll find addictions because it's around escape. So any type of thing that people use to escape, it's not just going to be drugs and alcohol, but whatever thing you do because you're trying to relieve yourself of all of that you're receiving from the collective.
I definitely live in a fantasy world. I'm not living in reality. Reality's a bummer. I have always just desired to have have a group of like-minded people, but I just am not ever going to be able to find that because I am all over the place with my beliefs. I really don't have this group of people that I'm on the same page with. I have groups where I'm on the same page about one thing, and then I have groups where I'm on the same page about other things. So I have this very isolated experience in life.
I think possibly because in the 12th house, you are connecting with the greater collective. You're not just focused on one group or the other, but you can probably tap into, because you also have your MC in the 11th house. So you can probably draw in for those groups that you associate with in the 11th house. You can probably draw what they need from your 12th house stuff.
All my
Also,
life, I wanted
it's
to pursue a
consciousness.
career in missionary work. I associate that with Jupiter and everything, but also the collective.
It also rules all altered states of consciousness. So, like when you're under the influence of substances, and especially like if you use cannabis. Yeah, I live in California, and pretty much everybody here uses cannabis, like more so than alcohol, even. That's very 12th house energy that you're literally connecting to that energy when you're under the influence of anything. It's a lot about self sabotage, addiction. You know, you can't really glamorize this house so much, but I do feel like if you have your North Node here, like you do, Chase, it makes it a positive area of life because it's like you're kind of meant to explore this area of life. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the self-sabotaging way, but I feel like you're meant to kind of explore the deeper meaning but in life and death connect, and what the afterlife is, if there is one, and all of that kind of stuff. That's just a lot. Like, you can't really kind of grasp it mentally. It requires a lot of surrender as well with the 12th house, being comfortable with the feeling of confusion, at least for a while, with this area of life, because it's a foggy energy. I mean, it's the energy of Neptune and Pisces. So it's about learning spiritual lessons on a soul level, and usually you're veiled. You're in this like veil of illusion sometimes because that's part of it. You're meant to kind of trust and surrender to the unknown. That's really how you mastered this house, I think, is you mastered the art of surrendering to the unknown and really believing that there is a higher power, whatever that is for you, like whatever you want it to be, whether it's God, the oneness, the collective unconscious, you know, whatever you believe, even religion. You really need to have a strong belief in a higher power to survive this area of life, because it can be pretty difficult otherwise. That's what I think. But I also don't have any planets here, so sometimes it's hard for me to really, really grasp this house. I think it's different for everyone. I think what makes it harder for me to grasp is when I see planets like Pluto here or like Uranus, and there's just so much information about that out there.
I have just kind of a funny story that I always think about that I think sums up the 12th houser thing. When I was working at Dunkin', I got hired and they thought that I would be this like really good employee, and I wasn't intentionally doing anything wrong. I think I was just slow and they thought that I would be faster even though I'd only been working there for like 5 minutes. One time someone said something about me and my boss went, "Oh, Chase is in her own world. She's not here." And I thought that was really interesting because I thought that I was there. Like, I thought I was paying attention, but she just noticed that about me, that I'm just not, I guess, fully present in the way that other people are.
People who have prominent placements here, people like shamans, spiritual healers, that whole, you know, field of healers, I've always been fascinated with, because I've yet to like see or communicate or anything with spirit, and like throughout my entire life, you know, under the influence, not under the influence. Like, I've tried everything and I just don't really feel like I connected this house. My son, actually, he's born with the South Node and Scorpio in the 12th house. And the entire pregnancy and even postpartum, so like the first few months of his life, I was just feeling that very deeply. I didn't know what I was feeling, but it was just a very, very intense emotional roller coaster type of energy that I was feeling. And I even felt like I was getting memories of his past lives. at least I think it was. I don't know what it was, but it was just like this intense feelings of sadness, and it could have been mixed with like postpartum and the hormones and everything, but I definitely felt that South Node and Scorpio in his 12th house. And I was going through a really difficult time. Although I did not have any complications during my pregnancy, most of it was experienced psychologically. Like, it was very profound. And there was so much fear and on my end, and there was just a lot. It was a lot. And, sure enough, he was born with the South Node in the 12th house in Scorpio. So I feel like that was pretty much my experience, like throughout the entire pregnancy. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
pretty
what they say,
interesting.
that it reflects that.
Yeah, like what happens, when you're in the womb. And it makes sense because that gets lodged into you in such a deep way, like subconsciously, like you're developing and you don't even know it because it's, when you're most vulnerable, it's when your soul, nobody knows when the soul actually enters the body, but it's when you're forming your experiences at that point, whatever they are. And it's funny, actually, I have another crazy story. I was in deep meditation once, and I was trying to heal like my subconscious wounds. I was doing like this regression thing, and I all of a sudden had this huge fear and huge sadness overcame me, and I felt like I was in my mom's womb and something really traumatic happened. And I called my mom and I was like, did something happen when I was in the womb? And she told me like she had a traumatic experience where she had a fight with my dad and he like threw a brick at her stomach while she was pregnant with me. And she was like, it felt this extreme sadness. My dad's really abusive, so she felt this extreme sadness and I felt it.
Wow.
And I literally was able to connect to that feeling in meditation. And that was just mind blowing to me because, like, how could that even be that I would even remember that? You can definitely access that feeling that you had when you were in the womb through deep, deep meditation, but it's just hard to get to that point. It's hard to quiet the mind enough. Yeah, this is like such an intense area of life. I'm the type of person that likes to make light of everything. So I feel like I can't really do that with this house because it's like serious. It's a
Yeah.
serious area of life. It's heavy, it's murky, and you definitely experience some suffering in this area of life. So we can't kind of make light of that. It deserves our respect, the 12th house. If you're a 12th houser, meaning if you've got like a stellium here of planets or even just one of your big 3 placements, that's huge. You're probably a lot more emotionally resilient than the average person.
I have had a great life and a great childhood and not a lot of, obviously with my father's death, that's a huge painful experience, but other than that, I've had like such a blessed life and I have endured so much like mental suffering anyway. So I definitely think that is due to being a 12th houser. I didn't know what anxiety was. I just felt terrible. My body was a prison
Yeah.
for like the majority of my childhood and teenage years. And then finally, when I was 19, I finally had the language and the education to explain what I was feeling. And I was like, oh, I think this is anxiety. So I went to my doctor and told him, and he said, yeah, we have medication that can treat that, but it doesn't seem like this is going to be like something you do for a short time. This is going to be a lifelong thing, because I was telling him stories about me feeling this anxiety from my childhood, and he's like, this doesn't seem like something that's going to resolve for you. Like, some people go through hard times and they're extra anxious, but this just seems like something that you just have. And I've tried very hard to go off anxiety and other medications, but I can't. I need it.
Well, that is very 12th house. And it's because, like we talked about earlier, you connect with what's going on for everyone. And so that's like some people experience it as fear or anxiety, but it comes from, you don't know where it's coming from. And it's just affecting you. And that is why some people do turn to drugs or whatever it is that they need to escape that feeling or that fear. And that's very valid, Chase. I've heard other 12th housers say the same thing. It's just this anxiety, this fear of I don't know what, but it's there and I can't see it. But,
Or like wake up with in the morning with this like intense dread, and I'd be like, in my mind, it would be like, you just ruined your life, you stupid like person. You did something so stupid yesterday. Now your life is ruined. And I'd think back and I'd be like, I didn't do anything yesterday. Like, I didn't do anything worth screaming at myself over. But every day I'd wake up and I'd be like, you did it. You did it this time. Or like times of depression where I just could not get out of bed for the life of me for no reason. Like I have everything I could ever want.
And I
Didn't
think that's
matter.
why they call it the house of self undoing,
Yeah.
where you can sabotage yourself because of subconscious things like you don't even know. And I was reading something that said that a lot of times, whatever your subconscious energies are in this house, if you don't know about them, those are really the things that in the other houses of your chart can take over and sabotage those areas.
And mine's in Scorpio. My 12th house is in Scorpio, so I can't imagine that helps.
Well, I mean, there's good things to Scorpio.
Oh yeah, I love it. I wouldn't
Mary
change
might
it.
disagree, but
I'm a huge Scorpio fan.
I mean,
Look at my necklace.
I
Look at my
think
necklace.
there's a
It's a
huge difference though
Scorpio.
between having your south node here or your north node here. I feel
Mm.
like south node here, that's going to obviously, magnify the negative stuff of this area of life. Because I think with the south node here, you've probably come from lifetimes or you've come into this life with that energy of self-undoing. And you described it so well because it's such a hard feeling to verbalize and you don't even know that anything is wrong sometimes. It just feels like something is off and you're just feels depressed a lot with the 12th house. And I really experienced this for the first time when I moved to California because my ascendant changed to the sign on my 12th house. And I didn't even know at the time what I was experiencing. Also, I do want to mention with synastry, let's say you have no planets in your 12th house, you're not really a 12th houser, but somebody comes into your life and puts their planets in your 12th house, they're going to activate that house for you. I think it's even more powerful than planets transiting this house. So they're going to trigger your subconscious issues, and that's going to come up to the surface. And usually it's not comfortable at all. It also rules our hidden enemies. So when it comes to love, if somebody puts a planet like Mars, let's say in your 12th house, more than likely this person's going to harm you at some point behind your back. And because that's what the 12th house is, it's not like the 7th house where it's open enemies. The 12th house meaning you don't really see it coming. So that's what makes this house so problematic when it comes to synastry. And it's usually the first thing that I look for when I do synastry readings is not having Venus or Mars in each other's 12th house. Sometimes with the sun or moon, maybe it might be good. I know Pisces placements kind of like it. If you have planets here, you might kind of like it. But I think even for you, Chase, you don't really like having someone's Mars in your 12th house.
Yeah, it was bad.
I mean, Scorpio Mars is kind of, anyway.
Yeah, they're
Abrasive.
scary. I know from my husband, they're just, they're not for everyone.
My mom was Scorpio Mars, and I think my brother is too. I mean, it's kind of an intense Mars. So.
Intense is definitely the word. Did she go from 0 to 100 real quick?
And
then
being
my
a
mom-
Scorpio moon, like it
afterwards?
was too much.
No, my mom was Cap. She was double Cap too. Cap rising, Cap sun. So
It just gets so passionate.
Yeah.
My husband has Scorpio Mars conjunct Saturn though, so I don't know
I
how
thought that
that
would
really
calm down.
changes it. I feel like we're kind of biased with the people who are closest to us.
that's true. That's true.
My boyfriend has all his like asteroids in my 12th house, but so I don't know if that's bad or good.
No, I wouldn't say it's bad. It's only like for sure going to be bad if it's Mars, in my opinion. That's the one I've seen pretty much 10 out of 10. It usually is not going to work out. And sometimes the
I've seen
planet
that work
person-
twice, just so everyone knows. But anyway, go on.
Well, sometimes the planet person, it's unintentional. They unintentionally deceive. Other times, most of the time, though, it's intentional. But yeah, definitely a red flag if somebody's Mars falls into your 12th house. This most recent 12th house transit of Mars that I had when Mars was in Leo, I attracted this stalker that I did a reading for. And it got so serious that I had to report him to the FBI, like cyber stalking division. So
Wow.
kind of, how 12th house Mars can manifest. Not lighthearted at all.
My dad had his Libra Mars in my mom's 12th house, and they had a good 31 years. And then my mom's best friend's married to a man who has his Mars in her 12th house, and I don't know them that well, but they seem good.
Yeah, I don't know. That's like, I feel like a 1 in 100 chance. Your dad's just a good person too. He was a good
Yeah.
person.
If they're a good
Yeah,
person, they're
good
not going to do you
morals.
dirty.
Well, yeah,
Like,
I
he
mean,
was a
that's
man of God.
everything in astrology is how is the person, because that's the whole thing why we're studying this is what are we working with and how can we master it? You know, how can we master ourselves with what we're given? And some people do better at that than others.
Yeah, most people don't even self-reflect, unfortunately. So it's like, how are you ever going to master those things? I feel like ultimately this is the house of self-reflection. That's for sure.
We're doing a lot of reflection here in the 12th house.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. I think we did a good job covering this house. To be honest, I was kind of nervous for this episode, but the whole experience we had before for recording this kind of set the stage. So
We took a
for real.
trip to the 12th house for all of you guys.
A field trip. Mary did anyway.
Trip.
yeah, I mean, who knows what kind of forces behind the scenes were involved with that, but we'll never know.
She
At
just
least
delete
not,
the app and re-download it.
yeah.
All right.
Well,
We're going to do something new next week. We don't even know what we're going to do, but we're going to do it. Actually, we do know what we're doing. We're having something really exciting happening.
yeah, we're having a special guest next week. I'm so excited for it, but I think we should have it be a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for
12th house.
next
Keep
week.
it 12th house, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep the 12th house, the
It's
house of
secret.
secrets.
We're really excited. But yeah, that's
Yay.
all we're going to say for today. And we're going to go off and record our weekly forecast. So tune in for that on Sunday. And see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.